Good morning. Our topic this morning is restlessness versus God-centeredness. And in beginning this topic this morning, I'm going to relate a very well-known story from the Bible, the story about Martha and Mary. You may know this story, it's very well-known. Jesus and his disciples were passing through the town where Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus lived, and they stopped by and for dinner. And with Christ, of course, Jesus being a very, very important guest, and his disciples also, Martha set out to making a very nice dinner for Christ and his disciples. And yet Mary chose to sit at the feet of Christ and absorb his vibration and listen to him speak and just sit at his feet, just receiving his emanating love and wisdom and infinite consciousness. And at a certain point, not long after Mary chose to do that, Martha came to Jesus and said, "Lord, I'm here doing all of this work by myself. Please tell my sister to come help me." And Jesus said, "Mary, Mary, you are restless and worried about many things, but Mary has chosen the better part, and what she has will not be taken from her." So this is a story that's repeated often when this discussion of activity versus inner communion comes up. You know, there's those of us that always like to be sitting in meditation and not very active, and then there's the other people that are always doing, but sometimes doing so restlessly that you wonder why they're even doing it, especially if they're doing it in the name of seva or in the name of the spiritual path or serving their guru. So this is an age-old dilemma. And, you know, I just wanted to pick it up from the thread that Martha actually was a great disciple of Jesus. Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, they were family friends of Jesus, and they had known each other a long time. And the fact that Jesus was even coming to stay with them. And there was another incident, I'm sure you've heard of the fact that Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead, another big story in the Bible. Well, when Jesus came to find that Lazarus had passed away, Martha came. The Martha we're talking about came to Jesus and said, "Lord, you know, too bad you didn't come sooner, because had you come earlier, our brother wouldn't have died. But, Jesus, I know now that whatever you wish, God will grant you." So she had that faith even before Christ raised Lazarus from the dead that he could do it. And she knew he was the living Christ, so she was a great, great disciple. So I think in this moment of serving dinner, she sort of just forgot, went into her restlessness and forgot. And let's look at what Martha said. She knew Christ well. He also knew her well. So she was, in a sense, reprimanding him and saying, "Jesus, Mary's just sitting there. Tell her to help me." And she said, "I'm serving alone." So what was at fault here for Martha? Martha, was she serving alone? Was she alone? Are we ever alone? So here Christ is actually in her house, and she said, "I'm alone serving here." I mean, Martha, the great disciple that she has, she's showing us the path. Christ is the goal. Krishna is the goal. Their consciousness is where we are headed, and yet the disciples show us the way we must walk. And Martha's saying, her ego got the most of her and said, "I'm all by myself here. I've got to do this by myself. It's only me. Everything just rests on my shoulders. What can I do? I just have to work by myself." And so, Martha's even thinking that she's alone working is already a misunderstanding of the teachings. And then the other is, I have to, look at my sister. She's just sitting there. So that judgment, that criticism, when our ego gets the most of us, that criticism of other is easily brought up. Well, look what they're doing. If they only just change their behavior, it would make my life so much easier. And Jesus is saying, Martha, you are restless and you are worried. You're agitated and you're worried. So let's look at Jesus' correction of her. Restlessness, agitation, where does that come from? It's from not being in our center. Christ was in her house. Had she been in her center and just remembering that Christ is right there, not only that evening, but all the time, that consciousness is right there, then she wouldn't be so off-center. And then the other thing is that she's just looking at the results. I've got all these people to serve. I've got to do it by myself. She's just looking at, she's the one doing the labor. She's the one that has to do it all. And she's looking at these people, if I don't serve them, they won't be fed. And she's not looking at, the divine flow of what's trying to happen, but, I'm attached to these results. This has to come out well for me, to make me look good, to make me look like a good hostess, which in many cases, it's a good idea. People need to eat. People need to cook. But it's the consciousness with which she was doing it. And then Christ said, and you're so worried, restless and worried. What are we worried about? How can we be worried about things happening all around us if we have faith that God is in charge, that God is the creator of this universe, and that He's in control? So have faith. We need to have faith that He actually knows what He's doing, and that we may not understand it all, but that if we have that faith and we can remember to have our awareness centered in Him, He will guide us step to step. And also, when we're worried and don't have faith, how can God bring the solutions to us that we're looking for? How can that intuition flow? How can the ideas, the creativity come and guide us how to get out of our predicament if we're so busy not having faith and saying, I'm by myself, what am I going to do? God's not here. So Martha's energy was basically not flowing up to her Christ center, to the Kutastha. Her energy was flowing down and out in restlessness and worry. And so it just brought all her energy down, and she could not grasp what was really happening all around her. Look at Mary. And so if our attitude is to not be attached to the fruits of our labor and do everything that we do as a self-offering to God, whether it's at the office, whether it's at home, whether it's serving all these disciples, what I'm doing is an offering to God. If I can remember that everything I'm doing is just going to Him, how can I be restless and worried? And then remembering that that God is the doer. He's the one that's flowing through us. We are not the ones doing the acting. If we think that, if we understand that He is in charge of the results, He is the one serving. God, Divine Mother, is flowing through me. This is not work, this is seva. These are my gurubhais, these are my friends, these are the citizens of the world, and they are my brothers and sisters, and I'm serving them, I'm giving to them. And as I give to them, it's not I who give, it's God that gives through me. With these correct attitudes, then we become a pure karma yogi, and we can find God on that path. So Martha had a bad day so that Jesus could correct her and show us also the way, the same way Krishna shows Arjuna, the way all the masters show the disciples and give a great example for us. And so meanwhile, Mary has the better part. Mary has chosen rightly. God is in the room, and she's absorbing his consciousness. Her first priority is receiving that divine vibration. Her energy is moving upward. She is open to receive everything that her guru is giving her. And I'm sure at that point, if Martha hadn't been so restless and worried, Yogananda even said Christ probably would have told Mary to get up and help her. But the lesson here was, Mary, your attitude is wrong. In your karma yoga, you are not unattached. You think you're doing this. And Mary has chosen the right part. Seek ye first God, and then everything else will flow smoothly. Let's receive what the Guru is giving us, that magnetism. Divine Mother and God is always showering us with blessings. Let's receive those blessings first in contemplation, like Mary did. Receive them, and with that attitude of an energy flowing up that spine, and that attitude of oneness with God and wanting God to flow through us and serve others, then we can get up and serve dinner. And that is always, it's oftentimes for a devotee, that fine balance between inner communion and activity. Mary focused on God. Life is so much about, where do we have our focus? Do we have our focus on the peace that the Guru is sending us, on his love, on his guidance, on his protection, on the light in the world? Can I focus on the light in the world instead of the darkness, instead of the fear, instead of what everybody else is doing? Let me focus on the light. And if I can focus on the light, then I can be a channel of that light to others. Master said that the minutes are more important than the years. Where is my consciousness in this moment? Is it with the Christ? Is it with Krishna at the Kutastha? Is it with the Guru? Is my consciousness in peace, in light, in divine love? Or is it somewhere else? Because if it's in light, then the years will take care of themselves. This chant, let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. We know that as devotees on this path. This world is a world of duality and a world of change. And some days they will be good and some days they will be bad. And even though it's a very strange world outside right now, on the spiritual plane, nothing is changing. God has always been there. He will always be there. And we are always one with him. Where are we going to put our focus? Are we going to be like Mary, just receiving the grace that Christ is giving her? Remember the line, those who received him, gave them he the power to become the sons of God. That's how we grow. That's how we walk the path. That's how we become like them. We receive their power, and then we become channels of their power. And then it's only them always flowing through us. God bless you.
Lord Krishna, of course, makes very clear this subject to us. Arjuna said, O Janardana, if you consider understanding superior to action, why, O Keshava, have you been urging me to do this terrible action? This apparent contradiction confuses me. Please tell me clearly which path will help me move forward towards the highest good. The Cosmic Lord said, at the beginning of creation, I established two means by which man could achieve salvation. The first was by wisdom. The other was by right action. Actionlessness cannot be attained by mere inaction. One who forsakes work in the name of divine aloofness from activity cannot reach perfection. No one can remain actionless for even a moment. All are compelled by nature, whether willingly or unwillingly, to be active, driven by the gunas, the three qualities of nature. The person who restrains his organs of action, but in whose mind rotate the thoughts of sense objects, is rightly regarded as a hypocrite and is self-deluded. That man, however, succeeds supremely, O Arjuna, who disciplines his senses by an effort of mind, who remains inwardly non-attached, and who engages his organs of activity in God-reminding activities. Perform those actions which your duty dictates. For action is better than inaction. Without action, indeed, even the act of maintaining life in the body would not be possible. Actions performed for selfish gain are karmically binding. Therefore, perform your duty without attachment in a spirit of self-offering. So Sri Krishna tells us that the action that is necessary is not any action. It's dharmic action. It's right action. It's action without attachment to the results. And what's the alternative? What if we don't do that? What if we meander through life, don't make any conscious effort at self-improvement? Then we're happy for a while, and then it's followed by sadness. If we made an effort in a past life, then we can rest on that. We can enjoy that good karma for a while, but then eventually it runs out, and we're unfulfilled. Swami Priyananda talks about a ballet performance he once saw. And the concept was that each movement of the dancers would come out of the last movement. And they would keep on going forward in one direction, but never come back to the point of origin. And he said it was very unsettling, unfulfilling, unsatisfying feeling to watch this. And because we want there to be a balance, we want there to be harmony. The soul wants this sort of ebb and flow. And creativity comes from our own inner center. And coming back to our center then gives us power to move again. This week we watched the play Hamilton, and it did have this sense of harmony, because it had ideals, and then it would state the ideal, and then repeatedly it would come back to that same ideal, that same concept, repeating same phrases repeatedly. And so there was a feeling of completeness, of fulfillment. And a fair amount of modern art and music doesn't have those ideals. Rather, what it expresses is the restlessness that Daya was referring to. And it's the nature of the undisciplined mind to be in constant restless motion. And if we allow our minds to just drift aimlessly like that, thinking only of ourselves with no values, with that mindset, then and then with that mindset, if we, let's say, roam in the malls and nightclubs and drinking and loud music, what's the end result? Where could that lead us if we just keep on going, allow ourselves to keep on going in one direction? The end result for the individual could be insanity. For society, it could be violence or even war, because the soul needs and wants that balance to come back to our inner center repeatedly. The restless rajasic energy draws us out, and the calming sattvic energy draws us back in to our center. And we need both directions, not just one. We need that harmonious balance between them both. Very few people could or should leave the world entirely and become a hermit. More likely, our dharma is one of intense activity and meditation, that balance. Sri Krishna here tells Arjuna that he must act, and we also must act. At the same time, within the framework of living in the world, we should take every opportunity to cultivate inner awareness, cultivate depth of meditation, cultivate inner joy. And we've spent a lifetime being influenced by outward restlessness. You know, all the influences even of news media and advertising and other people's opinions. It goes in a selfish direction, thinking only of ourselves and going outwards. And now we need to balance that by building our inner world. My first 10 years with Ananda was in our monastery. And I served long hours during the day, but my morning times and evenings were dedicated just to God, just to meditation, study, satsang, and I didn't have the responsibility of home or marriage or family, and so I was able to dedicate myself to that completely. And now we have a number of monasteries like that, and for some people it's a lifelong decision. For others it was like me. It was a period of intense spiritual dedication and practice, and also a wonderful preparation for marriage or whatever life has to ask of us. And Yoganandaji urged those who were not married to dedicate themselves to this kind of intense period of spiritual training and practice. But also all of us need to move from outer activity to inner awareness. And even our spiritual teachings help us in that. With the energization exercises, we take outward physical energy, we learn to direct it. We direct it inward. We draw that energy into the spine. And then with meditation, we draw that energy up the spine. When we repeat an affirmation, as we did earlier, first we repeat with a loud voice to capture the attention of the conscious mind. And then we repeat it softly to plant that seed in the subconscious. And then mentally only we repeat, it repeats itself in the superconscious. There's the story of King Janaka when he gave his disciple Sukdeva the job of walking around Janaka's palace with 2 oil lamps filled to the brim. And Janaka said, "Walk through all the rooms of the palace and come back to me, but don't spill a drop of oil." And when he came back, Janaka asked him, "Now describe to me each of the rooms that you went through." And Sukdeva said, "All of my attention was focused on not letting a drop of oil fall. I didn't really notice the rooms." And Janaka sent him back again. And the second time, he succeeded. And King Janaka said to him, "You have kept your attention principally on the oil lamps, without spilling oil, while seeing in minute detail everything in the palace. So also you must keep your main attention on God, without letting a drop slip away, while thoroughly performing your God-given duties of maintaining yourself and those in your charge." Yogananda Ji tells us, to attain the actionless state of divine union, you first must be intensely active for God. Service, in other words, performed in the consciousness of God's constant presence and guidance. The secret of the spiritual life is to balance meditation with selfless service. Be calmly active and actively calm. Thank you.